So in terms of a brief introduction, for those of you that might not be aware of Results Positive, we've been specializing in technology business management over the last 14 years, and specifically around project portfolio management, application portfolio management, application development. And we provide a range of different types of consulting services, as well as management services and support for our customers. We're also partnered with multiple different software solutions. And in today's discussion, we're going to walk through the different practices that organizations are starting to deploy today when it comes to agile and hybrid project and portfolio management. And we're going to highlight how some of the different tools are being used today. We're not going to deep dive into tools today. That will be a follow-on webinar. But we will be reviewing some of the practices around agile portfolio management, as well as the hybrid portfolio project management. So as I just mentioned, we're going to really look at it from a PMO perspective, and how the PMO is responsible for governance. They're responsible for overall financial management and resource management, and how do they do it in a hybrid world that everyone's starting to experience today. If not, they've been experiencing it for a short period of time. So we're going to come at it from a PMO perspective. So in the quote-unquote new PMO world, we are seeing a lot of different drivers for change, but we're also seeing an increased focus on business outcomes. And two of the key areas we wanted to focus on today is the faster planning and delivery cycles. So we see that in the convergence of traditional and agile, as well as hybrid planning approaches from a portfolio management perspective. And then we're also seeing that from adopting of these new frameworks in the actual project execution. And so that's where you have the combination of traditional and agile and hybrid delivery. So this has created opportunities for the PMO. I'd say that the big opportunity for the PMO is more collaboration across the enterprise, because a lot of the agile initiatives or iterative development initiatives are starting off in different groups, typically in the application development group or the product development group. And so if there weren't big relationships there in the past, there needs to be stronger relationships with the PMO, as well as increased collaboration. And the reason for this is that leaders and managers are still asking the same questions. They want to understand, what are we spending our money on? They want to understand what our resources are working on. And they also want to understand what are the benefits we're achieving from our investments. And so those questions still need to be answered, even though delivery and execution could be done in a different form and fashion. So what we wanted to focus on here first is value-driven portfolio management. And so in today's world, it's more than just managing a portfolio of projects. We'll still have projects, we'll have epics, we'll have those agile type of entities that we need to manage. We might even have products in our portfolio, we'll have applications, and we'll still need to manage the overall operational demand. And so in this new world, we still need to align to the business strategy, and that is supported by the overall Scaled Agile for Enterprise framework, which we'll highlight here in a minute. We also then need to manage these hybrid portfolios, waterfall, agile, as well as hybrid. And we're also seeing the trend around product management. We're not going to dive into that today, but just wanted to focus in on some of the differences here around portfolio management in a hybrid world. So from a traditional portfolio and demand management perspective, we need to balance our overall budget and financial resources with our resource capacity, combined with our strategy and our business outcomes. And we need to do that across our limited resources we have in terms of the budget, the prioritization of those, and the resources. And we need to do that across the different types of work. Kind of funny here, I got my support bug work, if you will. I got my ideation here, or my backlog of my agile development work, and then I have my traditional project work or even support work. And so I need to manage those components, those different delivery items, while still having my governance over my financial and capacity management. So when we start to look at portfolio management and look at it from a hybrid perspective, we start seeing there are different types of projects, there are different types of entities that we'll be managing. We might have a standard portfolio, but that standard portfolio now includes various agile or hybrid or iterative projects. We still might have programs, but the makeup of those programs is going to look and feel different. The projects themselves will have different types of projects. We might have a complete waterfall project. We might have a hybrid project where it has waterfall and agile, and we might have just standalone agile projects. We actually might start to manage our overall applications. We'll be looking at the actual epics and themes that we're actually building as part of our project portfolio or as part of our product portfolio. So the portfolio itself and what we're managing is going to look different, but the roll-up and the visibility will be similar in terms of looking at and answering those three questions. You know, what are we spending money on, what are our resources working on, and what's the value we're providing to the organization. When we look at it from a tools perspective, we see multiple different scenarios that customers are using today, but also we see a lot of different vendors out there and the different tools that they have available. So we see the kind of traditional where you have a standalone PPM solution, and those solutions have been in the marketplace for quite some time, managing projects, managing portfolios, and managing project execution. And then we saw the introduction of agile tools, and the agile teams going off and preparing their backlog, planning their sprints, identifying their user stories, and then having their daily stand-up Scrum meetings to manage those stories as part of those sprints. But what we're seeing then is in that particular scenario, the PMO seems to get visibility into what's being worked on, as well as understanding the effort that's being consumed by those various agile or iterative development projects. And so what we're seeing is kind of the common integration points, if you will, is bringing in the actual sprints and stories into your PPM system. In most cases, that's being brought into the actual work plan of the system. And so that you get that visibility at the PMO level to answer the question, what are we working on, what are we investing in? And then being able to provide those status updates as those things are being completed in your Agile tool, that those things are being updated, and then being able to provide the effort that the team is updating the Agile tool and updating the PPM tool. A big thing from the Agile teams is making sure that they don't have to do dual entry. That is happening a lot today with customers, but by setting up these integrations, you'll be able to reduce that dual effort. We're also seeing some of those PPM tools managing the overall epics as part of their portfolio, and then those approved epics are then being pushed into the Agile tools, and then the team can manage those epics, create their backlog, and go off and manage their sprints. So we're seeing that scenario. Here we're seeing the scenario where we have the traditional PPM tool with the integration, not necessarily bringing the epics through, but really bringing the information back from the Agile tool. So this is probably the most common use case that we're seeing today in terms of integration with traditional PPM tools and the Agile tools. We are seeing a growing number of platform solutions that have PPM and Agile together, as well as solutions that are built with PPM and Agile as part of the core solutions and newer solutions. And so we're seeing an uptick in those solutions, and we're seeing customers looking at those solutions. We're seeing actual customers starting to adopt some of those solutions. I'd say it's more in the early adopter phase, so that's something that we're seeing. And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about hybrid project management. The other thing that we're seeing in the portfolio management space is the ability to have these lean portfolio management solutions that are more visually focused on managing an overall portfolio and performing some of the high-level what-if analysis to make sure that you can easily adjust your project roadmaps while at the same time getting real-time visibility at a high level to your overall resource capacity. So it's not to the detailed level that you'd have in your core PPM systems, but it provides you that high-level planning, if you will, strategic planning. So I can look at what we want to invest in, I can look at our capacity, and I can balance that at a very high level. And what we're seeing with those tools are standalone. Those tools are also being established with built-in integrations into the PPM tools as well as into some of the Agile tools. So it can consume the information that you have in those detailed systems, and it just keeps it at a very lean, high level in those solutions so you can do easy strategic planning. So we're seeing that starting to take off in the hybrid portfolio management space. So in terms of being able to manage these hybrid portfolios and focus on the core business outcomes, we really aren't seeing a change in a lot of the business processes that needs to go on in terms of portfolio management. Because really at the portfolio level, you're still managing the actual investments that you need to make. You want to plan and schedule those investments. At the same time, then you want to forecast those from a budget and a resource perspective. And so we're seeing that these core business processes and functions are basically remaining the same. You'll have some nuances there in terms of managing different types of projects, if you will, or different types of entities here, such as an application, but the overall business processes are the same. But we are seeing a more focus on the strategic planning, that overall scenario analysis that we mentioned before from an overall lean perspective, so that you can easily understand that at executive strategic level, and then you can dive into the details into your PPM and your various Agile solutions. So next we wanted to talk about the various frameworks that we're seeing organizations having to deal with when it comes to hybrid project management. And so what we're seeing here in these crossroads here is that the PMO is having to manage the old frameworks. So we have traditional projects. Some of those traditional projects, in a corporation can be from facility projects. Those can be from, say a compliance project, or those can be just from managing overall running of the business and support initiatives. We're also seeing some organizations, applying these agile methodologies and doing it in their own hybrid fashion, which is creating a hybrid project delivery. And so what we're seeing is an opportunity to really focus on visibility and focus on managing the financials and resources and providing that visibility into value delivery, while giving the teams the opportunity to execute and deliver based upon their selected methodology. One particular methodology that's gaining more and more traction, and it's really for large enterprises, is the SAFE framework. And so the SAFE framework really just means that once you get to scale, first organizations start here at the team level. They establish their overall backlog. They have sprints, and they set those up at a team level. But when an organization gets so large and they have many teams, there needs to be some oversight in managing that at the program level. And then it ultimately then comes up to the portfolio level. I would say that some of our experience in working with organizations using SAFe, one key, I would say, benefit here, it increases collaboration and increases communication across the enterprise. We have seen instances where applying the SAFe methodologies actually slowed things down, and it's taken more time and effort to actually complete projects due to all of the additional planning up front around the backlog and the grooming, and then a lot of the retrospective activities on the tail end. But over time, we see that speeding up as organizations are applying SAFe long term. But what we're seeing is that a lot of the PMO processes and capabilities are still necessary in these organizations. One thing that I've added in here new, and we're still assessing and coming up with our point of view on, is the whole idea of product management. We know that the industry analysts are highlighting that a lot of PMO organizations and project management groups are focusing in on product management. And that's an easy migration when you look at it from an Agile perspective, when you're looking at backlog, and that backlog being a product backlog, whether that product be an application, whether that product be software, whether that be product be a combined solution. So what we're seeing that come into the industry, and some organizations are really focusing on more product-centric, but majority of them are still more in the project-centric mode, and focusing on financial management, understanding what they're investing in, and also then managing their resources. And I would say that it's a little bit of a challenge in how organizations are doing that today, but I think the ones that are doing it well still have their strong PMO structures in place so that they do that value-based portfolio management. They get that funding at the overall EPIC level. They get that funding in the traditional program or project level, and they're doing that resource planning at that level as well, and then allowing their teams to do the actual agile or iterative development and continuous delivery. We're seeing the big push, from an overall DevOps perspective. We're thinking that's actually accelerating some of the agile adoption, if you will. So those are two different types of methodologies, but in reality, you could combine those together, and that helps you with your overall continuous delivery. Just another example here from a portfolio perspective of applying some of the agile or hybrid methodologies to your portfolio management practices. There's the idea here in the SAFe framework around strategic themes. And those strategic themes, for those of you in the PMO, you could liken those to what are our strategic objectives of the organization, what's our strategies of the business. And so those can be likened to the same type of items, but those strategic themes, those strategic objectives now can help drive and make sure that we align and invest in our projects, or invest in our products, or invest in our epics and sprints, so that they're aligned to those strategic themes, which makes it easier to start reporting out in terms of the value delivered against those strategic themes or those strategic objectives in the organization. So another thing that we wanted to kind of walk through today is around hybrid project management scenarios. And so what we're seeing in hybrid project management, a lot of different scenarios with organizations. First, we're seeing organizations where they just got a set of traditional projects that are kind of following more of a sequential waterfall approach. And then they've got various agile projects in their portfolio where they're following Scrum, or they might be following Kanban, but overall they're doing sprints or they're doing iterative development. And so from that perspective, a project manager might be managing both. We're seeing that in instances where some of the teams aren't fully dedicated to Agile, and they might have some more operational or some other project work as well. And here again, that kind of typically depends upon the size of the organization. Next, we have hybrid projects in and of themselves. And so we're seeing this where some organizations are still doing their kind of overall traditional waterfall planning. And that planning can be from the upfront business case planning to actually down to the requirements or story development. Some of them are still doing requirements the old-fashioned way. Some of them are putting those in stories. And then from there, they are organizing them into sprints and really doing Agile from execution perspective and having multiple sprints associated with a project. And then coming back and doing closeouts. Some of them might be calling them retrospectives or coming up with another kind of hybrid term, if you will, on their projects. So we're seeing projects in and of themselves being hybrid. And that's definitely where we're seeing the need to have the integration between a traditional PPM solution as well as some of the traditional Agile solutions. And then next, we're seeing organizations that have multiple project types. And so in this particular case, they have the traditional waterfall projects. So they might still have some of those facility projects as an example. They've got various support projects, and they're kind of just tracking their support from a project perspective so they can track their budgets and actuals and resources. They then have various Agile projects in the organization, and then they might have some actual hybrid projects in the organization. One thing that we're finding is with some of the platform solutions as well as some of the newer solutions that have PPM and Agile in the same solution, it's very easy for them to support all three types because the solutions are built to support traditional, they're built to support Agile by itself, they're easily supported to support the actual hybrid project. And then when you have that all in one solution, then I can report time against all my different types of work, whether it be project tasks or whether it be user stories. And so I can do that all in one solution very easily. And so we're seeing that adoption occur as well. So in terms of from a project management solution, we're seeing the PPM standalone tools, just like we were seeing in the portfolio side. We were seeing the legacy Agile tools, and we're seeing the common, these are the most common anyway, use cases for providing that visibility into the PPM tools for the PMO organization so they can really answer the question, what are we working on, what's the current status, as well as they can look at the actuals from an effort perspective because that is rolling up into their PPM tool. One interesting scenario that we're seeing is because some of the platform solutions and these new solutions that have PPM and Agile, because there's been such an adoption already in some of the Agile tools, there organizations that are adopting these solutions are still asking for an integration with their legacy tools. And actually when we see organizations that have a legacy Agile tools and we're guiding them on how to use these new combined solutions, we actually advise them to continue with that solution if they've already adopted, the organization's already using those solutions. There are some business benefits of changing, so some of these organizations, especially that might be in the Scaled Agile framework, have very large Agile tool deployments, and which is costing them a lot from an ongoing maintenance perspective. So there is some really good ROI from a business perspective, but you might have a little bit of a mutiny on your hand in terms of your development teams that like to use their tool of choice. So it's interesting that when we're seeing this Agile, that a combined PPM Agile solutions, that it's working out really well for pockets of the organization that haven't done Agile, and they're starting there and just using one solution. But the pockets of the organization that already have an Agile solution and a tool of choice, really focusing on using that solution. And then we're seeing organizations, like I mentioned, some of those are migrating to just using a combined solution, whether it be on a platform combined solution, or whether it be just a standalone new solutions that have PPM Agile capabilities. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the PPM tools around hybrid project management. So in terms of the business processes from a PMO perspective to support these various delivery frameworks, we're seeing the same core processes that are necessary. One thing we've added in here is the product management. So that's kind of emerging capability there. But the financial management, the resource management, the overall reporting, we're seeing a big need when it comes to reporting of value and reporting of KPIs, and how do you do that across different delivery methods, because you typically have different metrics. So that's something that we're going to be covering in one of our upcoming webinars, focusing on the convergence of KPIs across different development frameworks, and really what are the core ones at the PMO level versus the core KPIs at the actual execution or development level.